I think that we are live.
I think we're running live, and let's start with the interview. Here we go. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Today I'm broadcasting from the very warm, hot, marvelous city of Hermosillo, Sonora, and boy, it's warm out here. But there is a lot of very hot issues that we're going to address in the show. And one of the headlines, it made headlines, but no one was really paying as much attention as I think we should, because there's just so much political news and news related to violence in Mexico. But it has to do with the future of Mexico's education, and one very important issue which has to do with textbooks. As you know, every time a country or a government decides to change textbooks, it becomes a political issue, because on the one hand, parents want the textbooks to be somewhat impartial to politics. And of course, many governments, it's a huge temptation to be able to portray in these textbooks their vision, political vision of the world. Joining us to talk about at least what we know about textbooks for first year in primary school that was made public this week. Joining us again is Marco Fernandez. You know him well. He's at the Tec de Monterrey's. He's also an expert on education issues, and he's been joining us throughout the years. Marco, once again, welcome to the show. I was reading different parts or different news reporting what is in this textbook, and the consensus seems that the main worry is that a lot of the stuff that is in this textbook for first year grade students is just it doesn't make sense, at least in terms of how you are trying to educate your children. And perhaps one of the big issues is that maybe math is not underlying correct. I mean, just why don't you put into context what do we know about these textbooks? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ana Maria, from a rainy Mexico City that precisely, I guess, that is a sign of the storm that is going on around the education textbooks for the country. Because for all the people that are watching and are us, I mean, we have to understand that the textbook is an essential tool for teachers who plan around the textbook what are the lessons that they're going to develop during the school year. And these textbooks are mandatory for all kids in primary school, but also in secondary school. And in all the textbooks, I mean, not only in the first year, but basically what we have been seeing of the different years of the textbooks, really there are multiple worry signs that not only they have a very distorted ideological views that are portrayed in their content, but also have serious flaws in pedagogical terms. For example, you mentioned the first year. In the first year, the kids are beginning to learn to read, okay? And this is essential skill that they have to acquire so they can build the rest of the knowledge of all the different subjects, including math. When you see the content of the textbook, it basically has long paragraphs that seem to be more target toward the parents and the teachers themselves than to the students, okay? They are assuming these long paragraphs that the kids already know to read fluently, something that obviously is a nonsense if you are a first year elementary school kid. Moreover, in the case of math, they reduce substantially the material that is allocated for this assignment. Instead of having a specific textbook of math as it is right now, well, until last academic year, now they put it all together and they reduce substantially the amount of material for math. Moreover, those experts, the colleagues that are experts on math, they have portrayed or they have underscored several flaws, pedagogical flaws. For example, the figures that are used in the textbook are not consistent with the math concepts. They are in later years, in the third year, for example, when they are trying to develop the concept of multiplication, they are multiplying mangoes and mangoes. I mean, something that is absurd in terms of the example. In the case, for example, of the textbook that is distributed for teachers at the secondary level, there is section, very distorted section on the history, in which basically they romanticize the guerrilla period of the 50s and 60s, and they suggest basically that the real change of Mexico has been achieved through the use of weapons in a violent way rather than through the votes and the ballots as it has happened. In fact, this last point is ironic because it's precisely the current ruling party, Morena, which has achieved this majority in Congress, have reached the presidency of Mexico and the majority of the governorships precisely through the ballot and not through the weapons, not through the violence. So sincerely, when you observe this distorted view of the history, in which basically the Cuban Revolution is romanticized, or it is highlighted the experience that some of the guerrilla members of Mexico had in their training in North Korea, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, as I have been reading all the material of the different textbooks, it is unavoidably concerning because of this distorted ideological view of the facts that have happened around Mexico's history. And the most essential question is how all this material will be translated in a better learning for kids in the Mexican schools, both public and private. Last week, there was a special report by the World Bank, in which basically they concentrated the different policies that are being implemented around the world to tackle the learning cost of COVID, that the COVID has, the pandemic and the closure of the schools have left for the different countries, and the big problem of the dropouts on the enrollment in the different schools around the world. Okay, unfortunately, in this summary of the best practices, Mexico is not mentioned because Mexico has not done any test of the learning that has been lost. They have not done any specific efforts to recover. I mean, the thousands of kids, just for those that are listening to us, between 2020 and 2022, Mexico lost 1.6 million kids because of the COVID. Wow. In this last year, we just recovered 400,000. That means that we still are short of 1.2 million kids that didn't return to the school. And instead of focusing on that, I'm focusing on trying to have a diagnostic of the learning loss, so professors, teachers have the structure to recover for their kids. No, we are in the middle of trying to see how are we going to implement these textbooks that have very serious flaws, and even worse, that really are challenging the legal framework. Because for those that are listening, I mean, some weeks ago, there was a federal judge that determined in a definite way that these textbooks should not be distributed to the Mexican public schools and private schools.
Mhm.
I mean, the authority, as it has happened, for example, in other spheres of government,
Mhm.
for example, the Tren Maya in the south of Mexico,
Right.
they have basically ignored the ruling of the judge, and they have begun the process of the allocation of the textbooks. Some
Mhm.
government, some states government, for example, Jalisco, has already said that they are not going to allocate those textbooks as long as the judicial decision is finally clarified. Querétaro, on the other hand, for example, or other states have said, well, we are in the middle of analyzing the new textbooks. What is true is that the teachers have not even received the training necessary to use
Mhm.
these uh, textbooks that have several flaws to see how are they gonna use them for their
Mhm.
planning of the classroom in the next school year.
Let me ask you this. In other countries, usually the teachers unions or teachers associations are involved in not only in trying to create or help to create guidelines, but clearly and at least commenting on the drafting
Mhm.
of these books, or at least commenting at one of the final drafts, and also in trying to develop manuals for teachers, because there's also the manuals that have to be
Mhm.
developed. Is the Mexican Teachers Union, which is tends to be a very powerful union, what has they been involved at all? I know the Parents Association have, but what about the teacher union?
The Parents Association have not been involved, and that's why
Right.
they challenged this in the court. In the
Mm,
case of the union, the union has always been pragmatic in political terms. They have
mm-hmm,
kept their silence. They have
mm-hmm,
not expressed their voice. And on top of that, the government official, Marza Arriaga, in the Education Federal Ministry, has claimed that he called uh, hundreds of teachers, supposedly, for
mm-hmm,
consultations for these textbooks.
uh-huh,
When the different media outlets and academics and civil society organizations request through the Freedom of Information Act, give me the information of those supposedly public town halls that you had with the teachers for the
mm-hmm,
textbooks. The education ministry has classified
that,
the information, and they have denied to have
mm-hmm,
this information. In other
mm-hmm,
words, this consultation is a lie. Okay,
mm-hmm,
so we are in the middle of a very critical moment in education in Mexico. Right now, we're talking about elementary and secondary schools,
mm-hmm,
but on
mm-hmm,
top of that, in the case of high school, that what is known educación media superior with the
mm-hmm,
different subsystems, they are
mm-hmm,
also pretending to start a new curriculum beginning in August without training teachers, without providing the funding to implement it, without, I
mm-hmm.
mean, they say, no, we're going to have a new way of teaching in a transversal way. In other words, in paper, it sounds very fancy that they are going to try to put together lessons of biology, lessons of physics, lessons of chemistry and
Mm-hmm.
math in one single class. The problem of that discourse, it has several flaws. One, that basically teachers so far have not been trained for doing such kind of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Two, that usually in high schools, you have, if you remember a long time ago, you have your teacher for chemistry, your teacher
Right.
for physics, etc., etc. All these teachers teaching each public school in
Mm-hmm.
a hour base. They are not full-time professors. That's why they have to teach in different schools, so they have a better salary. How are
Mm-hmm.
you going to do it logistically, because they are in different schools at the moment that they want to do it all at the same time? Okay,
Huh.
and on top of that, they said, oh, in some subsystems, for example, CECITE, we're going to increase the lessons of history because history is very important. Okay, that is going to have a budget consequence. Where is the money? And the
Mhm.
state's authorities, including from Morena, are saying, okay, federal government, where is the money? And
Nobody.
the federal authority has even the indecency of saying, we're gonna help you to have to schedule a meeting with la Secretaría de Hacienda, with the finance ministry, so you can negotiate that. The state's government obviously are saying, are you not?
Yeah.
You are the one that want the change in the
Mhm.
curriculum, not us. So as you
Mhm.
can see, it is not only the textbooks that in itself is a
Mhm.
huge problem, but it's like an addition of several flaws, of several problems that are really portraying a huge crisis in the education system in Mexico.
Let me ask you this. So, I mean, I hadn't realized the impact also on secondary, which secondary and high school, right?
Mhm.
So, as of next 3 weeks, some schools even start in about a week.
Yes.
You're going to have a situation where there are books for first grade. Is that my understanding? And then for the other grades, there is going to be the need of implementing a new way of teaching that integrates all the subjects matter in a way that the teachers that has never been done before, at least in the last 40 or 60 years,
Exactly.
right? So, and there's no manuals, there's nothing out there in order to kind of guide teachers. So what material are they going to use? I mean, what textbooks are going to be available for children in second, third, fourth grade, sixth grade, primary, secondary, and high school in Mexico? There's no textbooks available?
Let's put by parts. Let's divide by parts. In the
Right.
case of elementary school, they have
Mm-hmm.
already allocated
Uh-huh.
the textbooks for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And so they are there. In the secondary, there is the uncertainty because we know that they have sent at least the textbook for teachers, okay, for first grade of secondary. We do not know what's going on, the textbooks for the kids and the textbook for the teachers for the rest of the school, for the education levels, no, for second and third
Third.
grade of secondary. In the
Right.
case of high school, there are no textbooks, okay? But there is a change of the curriculum. And that change
Mm-hmm.
of the curriculum implies really retraining teachers and
Mm-hmm.
providing enough resources to implement this new curriculum.
Right.
But there is no such. So there is a lot of uncertainty right now,
Mm-hmm.
particularly because let's put the drama just to more complicated. The private schools have been
Mm-hmm.
told, no, you're not going to have to do it this year. We will deal with you next year. Fine.
Okay.
Then the state schools have been said, well, we are in the middle. We will see. So basically, they are not going to implement it. In the case of the schools from autonomous universities, for example,
Mm-hmm.
las prepas de la UNAM, or
Right.
the schools from the University of Guadalajara, they have
Mm-hmm.
said, using their autonomy, ciao, ciao, we're going to go
We're not going to do
goodbye.
it.
We're not going to do it. The only ones that are screw up and do not know how are they going to do it are the federal schools.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
CONALEP, for example, CECITE, the
Mm-hmm.
HETI, that are the subsystems in the high school, that they
Mm-hmm.
are in the middle of trying to find the order of how are
Right.
going to be doing this new curriculum in the case of high school. As you can see, I mean, this is a disaster. It is
Yeah.
not an exaggeration. I mean, they can claim whatever. They can say, "Oh, the critics are because they are neoliberal. They are
Neoliberals, right?
conservatives." I mean,
They want to
BS.
promote
I mean,
capitalism.
at the end of the day, that's BS because they
Right.
can use whatever adjectives they want. But at the
Right.
end of the day, how are they going to tackle the challenge that kids have lost
Right.
learning because of the COVID? That there are socio-emotional problems right now that are undermining the possibility of learning, that there is 1.4 million students that didn't return to schools. Those are the big problems. So
And they're
there
not
is no
dealing with it.
solution, and they are just pretending that those problems do not exist in Mexico.
Well, you got to come back soon. School is supposed to start in about 3 weeks, I believe. The public schools, some private schools are already starting in about a week and a half. So promise me you'll come back. We'll continue trying to figure out what's going to happen, and maybe the Secretary of Education will finally come out and make a statement.
Good luck with that. I mean, by now we have seen that basically it's like a ghost. She only appears for the parties, the official parties, but there is no way that she explains to the public what is going to happen. She doesn't take any interview. She doesn't go to the press to explain to parents, to teachers, what the heck is going on.
Marco Fernandez, once again, expert on Mexico's education system. Once again, I really appreciate you joining us here on Living in Mexico. Once again, bad news. This is terrible. Thank you so much, Marco. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening